Bitcoin is trading around $85,000, and there's understandably a lot of uncertainty going on with the market and a lot of speculation as to why the price action has been just down only without any sort of recovery. Now, before I get into this, make sure you subscribe, turn on bell notifications. Everything I say here is very time sensitive. Now, first off, let's start with the good news. We had basically the Fed come out and speak today, basically saying that they're going to cut interest rates in December. So that flipped the odds on Polymarket from, I believe, it was like 20% that they were going to cut interest rates in December. Now it's sitting around 65% now at the time of this recording. And there's been a lot of just like FUD kind of going around with this whole narrative that these DAT companies like the Bitcoin treasuries, Michael Saylor, they're basically going to start unwinding their positions, selling off their Bitcoin, and they're not going to be listed on the NCYS or something like that. Basically means that it's like an $18 trillion assets under management company, and due to the kind of like the price action and how these Bitcoin treasuries are structured, they're not going to qualify to be basically like purchased. And so that is going to create a lot of sell pressure if that actually goes through. That should be finalized, I believe, sometime in like February of next year. So we do have some time, but you could make the case that they're going to front run this. Not too concerned about that, to be completely honest with you. The bigger concerns I have is that seemingly it looks like all these old school like Bitcoin wallets are selling off all their Bitcoin. They're transferring all these like massive amounts to just various kind of wallets and exchanges. And you have to ask yourself the question, like, why is this happening at this time? Because obviously they would have had a lot more opportunity to sell higher, right? Why are they all panic selling at like $85,000, $90,000, etc.? And I think that, there's different kind of speculations, right? One of the main ones is saying that, some kind of like foreign country has kind of cracked the quantum computing code. And so they're basically using this to unlock these like Bitcoin wallets that are not as secure. I don't really think that that's really the scenario. Like that could be the case, but in my opinion, if they're able to crack something like the Bitcoin, like a 24-letter password, they're able to crack a lot more things like bank accounts and like other sensitive information that I think they would go for first before even like going to Bitcoin. Not to mention there's so much more money to get from other types of, entities and avenues, right? So I'm not really too concerned. Now, what is really concerning to me though, and I think it's more evident now as kind of like time is unwinding, is obviously there's been a lot of questions when it comes to the whole, October 10th liquidation event. Pretty much me and like all of my circle of friends we've all been in crypto for a very long time, and we've never seen anything really like what's going on. The closest we can kind of pinpoint this is the whole fallout when 3 Arrows Capital fell, Terra Luna collapsed, FTX. And so we kind of speculate that maybe one of these like large entities, like they really went under. Maybe it was like multiple. There's like a lot of rumors that like huge ones kind of are just like, they're basically insolvent. And so basically the theory behind all of this is maybe one of the larger crypto exchanges, which I'm sure you guys know, I don't really want to like name names, but apparently the rumor is that they're kind of like moving the price of Bitcoin down very, very controlled, to say the least. And they're allowing these other exchanges to basically buy up the crypto that they lost so that they're able to fill their balance sheet, and they have massive holes in their whole like allocations, right? Obviously they lost a lot of money as well. So that's what kind of like one of the speculations. Now the other side of that coin is, even if the exchange is not helping them, maybe they're just being forced sellers and they're being forced to liquidate, because usually what happens is when you have these kind of like unwindings, everything's good when everyone's buying, right? You have all this like buy pressure, everything's going good, liquidity is kind of flowing. But what happens when you have a liquidity crunch, like what's going on now, you have this massive like unwinding event, and it's just like a cascading event. That's why we saw Bitcoin crash from like 90K to like 85K, like in a matter of minutes. And then even like last night, Bitcoin crashed from like around 84, 85-ish. It went all the way down to like 82 or 81, like in literally like 5 minutes, I think it was. And that usually happens when there's just like massive sellers just like basically getting liquidated or margin called, in my opinion. And the timing is always like very, very weird too. Like it always happens like at a really weird time overnight. And what happens is typically like Asia will pump the price of Bitcoin, and then it just goes into this like selling spree whenever the US markets open, or like the New York session opens as well. So it just looks like a lot of just sell pressure. There's not really a lot of people buying. I think we've had like record number of outflows. The only positive inflow that we've had so far is with the Solana ETF, which is bullish, but it's not enough to prop up the price of Solana. And obviously if Bitcoin's going down, nothing's going to go up. So there's just a lot of uncertainty. And I kind of speculate that, we do have to find some kind of bottom. Like my base case right now is that we're going to at least go back into the 50 weeks simple moving average, which is around, I think at this time of recording, around like $103,000. I think at the very minimum, we need to put in some kind of like lower low before we go, much lower in my opinion. If that is the scenario. Now, obviously there's always a chance that we can go to all-time high and all this kind of stuff, but the bulls really need to kind of step in and do some work, because basically we need to obviously reclaim the 50 week, which is 100K. Let's just call it 100K. Then we need to go into the 105 to 106 region, which is a big area of basically now it's resistance. So if we can turn that area into support, then I think it would have a good chance of us going up into probably like 120-ish range to challenge all-time highs. And at that point, I'd really be on the lookout to see kind of how Bitcoin reacts, because there's a lot of resistance. Now, the one thing we do have going for us is I think there's like, at the time of recording, like $30 billion, something crazy in liquidity that the exchanges would make if they basically send the price all the way up. And it would make a lot of sense the same way that they made so much money on the way down. Maybe they would catch people offsides and basically make a lot of money this way. And they would also, get all these traders out of their positions, because whenever these traders are in the positions, they basically have to be paid out whenever they win or they close their positions and profit. And I think that these exchanges don't have as much money on hand as they used to, especially with the whole October event. And so you could make the case that that's also being formed. And I think that they're going to write off of these narratives and see like, kind of like what they can spin as the narrative, because obviously we have a macro kind of liquidity crunch going on. We have obviously the Fed, they're hinting at cutting rates about 25 basis points, I believe, in December. That's not a for sure thing, but we do have that in the corner. And then, obviously we have stock market. The Fed, the thing about the stock market is like the Fed can always say like, oh, we don't really care about the price action, but they need to, because their dual mandate is basically like not having any kind of like recession. Because like Jerome Powell, I'm kind of like digressing a little bit, but I'm going to kind of connect the dots. So Jerome Powell, he basically doesn't want to be remembered as like the guy that just like let inflation run wild and that he screwed everything up. And so he's trying to balance the whole jobs and the inflation. And I think inflation is kind of being controlled, but due to all this like government shutdown and all this lack of data, they don't really know what they're doing. But if they do let the stock market collapse, that's going to force us into a recession. And so no, that's not good for anybody. It's not even good for like other countries. And so we need to somehow combat that, and it would make the most amount of sense, in my opinion, for them to cut another 25% basis cuts, just so that they can kind of like kick the can down the road and then decide maybe in January or February what they actually want to do. And so I think if we can set the stage for that, I think that the Fed is going to make another announcement probably over like the next week or so that is going to signal some sort of rate cuts. And I think at that point, you're going to price that in with quantitative easing that starts in December. The markets are always going to be forward looking. So they're going to try to price everything in about 6 months in advance. And so I think that that's going to drive some liquidity into the overall markets. And so obviously Bitcoin is going to benefit from that. So I do think that, obviously things are really, really bad right now. We haven't seemed to catch a break. I understand people are very frustrated. But the good news is I do think if we can challenge like I said, if we can at least go up to like the 50-day moving average, 50 week, I think that what could happen in that scenario is if Bitcoin goes up, like, let's call it 105K, I do think altcoins can probably go up like at least 2 or 3x, because they're just so depressed right now. Like there's been no alt season. Like your favorite influencer has been calling for this for like years, and it's just not there. And so I think at the very least, if Bitcoin can kind of catch its footing, these altcoins are really going to run. And at that point, I wouldn't say like hold on to them and do anything. Like obviously nothing I say is financial advice, but look to at least consider taking some profits, so that if we do go into this prolonged bear market, then at least you're kind of covered. Like you can pay off maybe your debt, maybe you have some money for like the real world stuff, and just don't get caught on the wrong side of things. There's nothing wrong taking profits. There's nothing wrong keeping some of the money into the system, but you always want to have money to buy at cheaper prices, because you can always bet on some sort of event that's going to run wild. And I do think that while we may have like more of a bullish into the Q4 and maybe even like a Q1, I do think that sometime next year we're going to have a very bearish downturn. So just be prepared for that. And yeah, that's pretty much all I got today. I'm off to go probably eat some sushi. I just worked out right now, and hope you guys are crushing your goals and staying safe and being positive throughout this kind of hard downturn, because I know it sucks. So anyway, guys, make sure you're subscribed, like this content, share with a friend, and turn on your bell notifications. I will see y'all soon. Trade safe.